Running indoors versus outdoors. Which one should you do? Which one's better? We're gonna unpack that right now. So, especially if you are more of a beginner, I definitely do recommend running on a treadmill a little bit more. And the reason for that is I want to use myself for example. So, I'm still very much a novice when it comes to the act of just running like long distances by like on its own. But it's hard for me to kind of keep my heart rate down while I'm running, which is normal because if you're very new to running, the last thing you want to worry about is like where's your heart rate at and making sure you're in the right zones, etc. And just because it's already a new stimulus for your body, both exposure wise, physically, physiologically, and like just mentally in like with your psyche and everything, your heart rate's already going to be jacking up pretty high, and it's going to be pretty hard for you to kind of set yourself into that pace, into that flow that just feels right for you. So then you know where like zone 2 feels, zone 3, zone 4, things like that. And so it's pretty hard to gauge that if you've never done it before. And with you being outside, it's really easy for you to like want to go fast. It's just because when you are especially trying to be in like zone 2 area, that lower heart rate range, it's going to be hard. So I find that using doing most of my runs as a beginner still on a treadmill is more helpful. That way I can set the speed on whatever like level feels right for me. So for me right now, for me to be in my aerobic area around that 130, like high 130s, low 140s, I'm around 4 to 5 miles per hour on the setting on my treadmill. And the other variables that you can account for is also for like wind, for the temperature, for also elevation and like inclines and declines, hills, things like that. Excuse me. So those things you can account for since when you're outside, those things are going to be jacking up your heart rate, changing things up and stuff like that. And especially if you live in areas of the world where you don't get the best weather all year round. And I mean, of course, you can run in colder, harsher weather as well, as long as you are dressed appropriately. But running on a treadmill has a lot of those advantages. So then you are running on a very flat surface. You can control the like it's set to like basically zero, and then you just control your speed. And then right there, it's almost like when you're bowling and you really want to like do really well, but then the gutters are right there and you have so much intensity. You can just like it's just chaotic, but in a way for you to like organize and control the chaos. There's the bumper that comes up, so then your bowling ball doesn't like go into the gutters, and then it's like bordered up, so then you're going to hit the pins no matter what, unless you're super super bad and you somehow like snake your way like through that like opening on either ends. But it's pretty hard to mess up that bad, but if you do, don't worry, I've done it before. But that's the good analogy is that you're able to do when it comes to running on a treadmill, which helps. So then you can spend time getting more familiar with the act of running itself, psychologically and physiologically, and help you understand what zone 2 feels like around your heart rate around that 130 to 140s feels like, in the 150s and 160s, and then etc. It helps you know kind of what that pacing feels like. And that's why like one of the weirdest things to me that like before, like if it's like more so if you know is that like people are like, oh, I run at a like 612 per mile pace, or like or do a 645 mile pace, or like, hey, some of your runs I want you to run at this X pace and then some at your marathon pace. And then in my head I'm just like, how do you know that? Like, how do you know that you're running at this like pacing compared to this? Like, to me, the whole thing just feels very foreign, and I'm just running. And I'm like, how do you know that stuff? But it's if I were to translate that over to lifting, and from a muscular contraction standpoint through like a barbell, machines, deadlifts, squats, bench pull, push pull, lunge, whatever, I understand what that feels like, that tension, that muscular tension and pump. And when I am in like the like higher rep ranges, the mid rep ranges, the lower ones, knowing when to like push on the brakes or step off. and things like that. So it's like at the very beginning stages, you just don't know because all of it's so new to you, all the stimulus, that your brain, you're just trying to index as much and categorize things and sort through the chaos as much as it can. But until you just have more time under the belt, clocked in really, you just gotta clock in longer, and then you start to really understand and you start to kind of see how you can manipulate the variables and stuff like that. And so pulling this back, if I were you, which one is better? It just really depends on what you need it for, especially if you're in those early stages of running. Running on a treadmill is super helpful, so you can control a lot of those variables. So you have more stability within how you're able to perform the exercise, and that way you can truly understand the breathing pace and just how your body feels and just where you kind of need to be at different stages. And then that way you are able to go out onto like the trails, the sidewalks, things like that. And so right now for me personally, I am 4 or 5 weeks into my marathon prep, and for the first 3 to 4 weeks I was running outside, but now after a couple of days of trying it on the inside, I think this would be more advantageous for me to run on a treadmill at least 2 sessions a week for the next maybe month or so. I'll just give the next month, since where I am in the Midwest, it's end of February now, so going through March, the season's like still changing and still a little bit like breezy, and not bad by any means, but still a little breezy, and so I'm not missing out on like a lot of like heat and summer and things like that yet. And for me, I personally like running in the heat. But I understand that some of those really high temperature days is a variable you will have to worry about. But for me right now, for the next, I think, 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to run on the treadmill just to really stay in those really true aerobic zone 2 areas to really build those adaptations, from like those aerobic enzymes, the mitochondria, the capillaries, just so then oxygen is doing its thing, my body does its thing, the maths out. And so that's a really good place to start, and then kind of do some outside still. That way it's just more fun and more scenic, and then eventually I'll have a better control, pulse for how I'm able to control my pacing, and then I will migrate over to being outside. So it really just depends on you, but what you personally like, what you need, and of course depends on the environment you are in. And yeah, a lot of those variables. Also, you don't want to run it in a place that's like not safe. So running on a treadmill does have those advantages. So there's pros and cons to both, either outside or inside on a machine. It just depends on what you want out of it and which one's going to be more favorable to you in that moment. But just sharing my personal experience right now as a more so beginner in my infancy when it comes to running, and for this marathon prep, running on a treadmill is just more helpful to me. Even though I don't want to, I just know it's going to pay off in the long run, and so I can suck it up for a couple of weeks before I can go outside, and it's only going to help me get there even faster, because that's the point. So it's temporary, and I can accept that and embrace that, and it'll be all right. So just wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. If you're trying to make the decision of whether you should run on a treadmill versus outside, which one's better, there really isn't a better. It just, whichever one just makes more sense to you. That's a better way to ask that question, and then you'll have a more advantageous answer. So, okay. So this week was good. The tail end now. This week's mileage is about 8 miles. I think, yeah, right on 8. Because I'm running like 2.6 to 2.8 miles out of each 3, and have had 5 lifting sessions in this week, so which is really good right now because there's not really much interference since my running mileage is still so low, so it's not really going to affect my lifting goals and everything too. So yeah, we're still cranking through it, doing good. But awesome, guys. Thank you for listening, for watching. Catch you in the next one. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. And if you think I've earned it and you are liking this episode so far, please leave a rating underneath on whichever platform you're listening to. It really helps. Thanks.